What's going on, guys? Pat here, and in today's video we are finally fixing the wheel hop issue on my car. Now, if you remember back to the shakedown that we did at Lime Rock, in the footage you'll see that the car had horrible wheel hop, horrible shake whenever I would get on the brakes hard in any of the braking zones. The whole back end of the car would jump, the rear wheels would be going way up and down in the wheel wells, and to make the whole car bounce, shake, and it was pretty much undrivable when you were using, anywhere near the limit of the brakes. Really anything over 70% brakes would induce that wheel hop. So I ended up using like probably 70% brake force most of the time while I was there. And I had made a few bias adjustment changes in between our sessions, but it didn't really address it. And once we got the car back home, I was like, all right, I'll adjust for the next event. But literally for the last month and a half since that event, it's been raining nonstop and there wasn't any events to go to with all the rain, so I didn't address it. And I was actually getting the car ready for an event that was this past weekend, and I had got new brake pads for it. I put Willwood BP30 compound pads in there, and I was going out to bed them, and the car wouldn't even stop from 20 miles per hour with the new pads without horribly shaking the wheels off. Decided now is time to actually address the issue now that it's way worse with the actual track pads. So the first thing I did was kind of max out the brake bias going forward down here on balance bar. I don't know how well that's going to pick it up. So there's a little balance bar up here above the steering column, and basically as you thread it one way or the other, it'll adjust the brake force through the pedals. So basically as you thread it out towards the driver's side of the car, it's going to give more force to the master cylinder you're threading it away from, which would be the driver's in this case. So I maxed that adjustment out, and it started to get rid of the wheel hop, but the rear wheels were still locking up first, which isn't how you want your brakes set up. You always want the fronts to lock first before the rears. So that told me it was kind of a brake force distribution issue. And Tilton says if you max out the adjustment on the bias adjuster and it's still not where it should be, you need to change the master cylinder sizes. So that's what I did. I ordered a new one here. There's two options that I could have done, or really three. I could decrease the front master cylinder by 1/8 of an inch. I could increase the rear master cylinder by 1 inch, or I could decrease the front by 1/16 and increase the rear by 1/16. I ended up increasing the rear by 1/8 of an inch. As far as impact on the brake pedal feel, this is going to make the pedal a little firmer, and it's going to reduce the throw. And so swapping over to this master cylinder should put the bias about where it'll be, and then I can dial it in with the adjusters. So I'm going to start taking this apart. I'm glad that we were finally able to resolve the issue, or at least diagnose it, so now it's just a matter of resolving it. So nothing too crazy as far as stripping it down goes. I'm going to disconnect the front master cylinder from the pedal. It's just a jam nut and it's a threaded rod. I'm going to undo the two nuts to take this master cylinder off the firewall. I'm going to leave all this hooked up for the front. And that'll give me access to the two nuts that mount this master cylinder. I'll disconnect it, take it out, and swap the reservoir over, and should be pretty straightforward fix. So I'll check in with you guys once I make some good progress on that. I had to swap a couple things over and change a couple things to get this ready to go in the car. From Tilton, this front port has a plug in it, so I had to move that up to the top port since that's the one I'm not using. And then I put in my adapter off the old master cylinder. I believe it's male 3AN to male 3AN, just to hook my hard line up to, or my stainless flex line rather. And then on the top here, I had to hook up my direct attach reservoir. From Tilton, the master cylinders come with an adapter. You can see on this one, I put it on the old one to adapt it to something that can take a fitting, which is usually used if you're running like a remote reservoir. Your line would go into a fitting on that adapter. But since I'm doing the bolt-on reservoirs, I don't need that. So at this point, the master cylinder is basically ready to bolt back onto the car, hook everything up, and then bleed it out. So I'm gonna start getting this back together, and then I'll check in with you guys either while I'm bleeding the system or after it's bled and when I'm ready to test it. So I've got the new master cylinder all in there. Everything's all bolted back together. I'd filled it up with fluid yesterday and just kind of let it sit overnight to sort of gravity bleed. I'm still gonna go through and actually bleed it at the caliper bleeders, but Up under here, pedals all hooked back up. I was actually fighting with the push rod, threading it into the actual balance bar assembly. There's two going into the balance bar, one obviously one push rod for each master cylinder. The new one threaded in fine, but the one for the front master cylinder, which is the old one that we're reusing, didn't want to thread in, so I actually had to disassemble the balance bar, and I chased it with a tap. I assume the threads are starting to get a little messed up. It's aluminum, so they're pretty you know, sensitive threads. It doesn't take much to get them messed up, but I got that all set back up. I had to reset the distance between the two balance bars. I have no idea how well that's going to pick it up. It's a 2.62 inches center to center for the sort of pivots that hook up to the push rods. So that's all reset. The brake bias is still super forward. I'm just going to leave it there to go out and start testing and reel it back to where it needs to be. But yeah, I'm going to now get the rear brakes all bled out, and then we're going to take this thing out for a quick test drive and see if we fix the issue. All right, so I took the car out for a quick test drive. Didn't really film anything, just kind of wanted to focus on the brakes and see what they were doing. Hit the pedal, instantly locked the rears up. It was pretty much just as bad as it was before. I threw the bias super forward, and between doing that and the new master cylinder definitely helped. It wasn't as drastic, but it was still doing it. So I decided, instead of throwing yet another master cylinder at it, to do something else that a lot of people do when they're having brake issues like this, which is stagger the brake pad. So I left the BP30 pad in the front, and then I changed back to my BP10 pad on the rear. And it's been fine for most of the events I would typically do. I'm not too worried about overheating the rear pads, but if that issue comes up in the future, then I actually will have to come back to the drawing board and change things around. But that seemed to fix the issue. So with the new master cylinder and then staggering the brake pads front to rear, I was able to get the brake bias back towards the middle of the adjustment range where it should be. And finally, the brakes are acting as they should. So the front wheels are locking up before the rears, and there's zero wheel hop. So finally have the issue resolved for now. I really think a lot of my issue just stems from the fact that I have a pretty big area difference from the front to rear pistons. Unfortunately, because this is an Oldsmobeast 10-bolt rear end, there aren't too many Wilwood kits available. There's only two, and they use the same caliper. So in the future, I'm gonna go to a floater rear end, at which point I can actually go to the same exact caliper in the front if I want, or go to the 4-piston version, which is still pretty close, which is the long-term fix for this. This is kind of like a band-aid just to get it through this year and next year. But yeah, finally got the wheel hop all resolved. Ultimately, it just stemmed from having a brake balance that was way more rearward than it should be. So by changing the master cylinder up to 1 inch from 7/8 and then staggering the brake pads, I was able to get the adjustment into, or get the bias rather, into a range where I could set it with the adjuster. So finally, the car is drivable, which will be good for upcoming events and next year. That was the biggest issue we were facing with the car, so really happy to have that addressed. Car drives as it should now, feels really good, brakes really well. I could probably play with the bias a little more just to get it perfect, but no more wheel hop issues, so really happy with that. So not too much of an exciting video, but I know some of you guys wanted to see me tackle this issue and address it, so hopefully you guys got some useful information from this video. And then when I go to the long-term fix of changing the rear end and the rear calipers, I'll definitely make a video on that. So hope you guys enjoyed. Feel free to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this and want to see more, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.